G'day listeners! You're listening to the weekly Dartscast podcast with your co-host Alex Moss and Burton DeWitt. Here in Australia, we like to call something bonzo if it's awesome or it's great. So when you listen to the weekly Dartscast, you're listening to a bonzo show. They have amazing guests, awesome interviews, and they'll give you all the ins and outs of the darts that you'll need this week. So sit back, relax, and it's time to get into it. Oh, check that out. 180. You beauty, mate.
Hello and welcome to the weekly Dartscast. I'm Alex Moss and it's time to talk tungsten. Alongside me is, of course, the Darts Strava King, Burton DeWitt. How are you doing?
Well, I might be the Strava King, but I'm definitely not the last man standing king. I'm the first man out king, if anything. Well, I guess not first because mine was the fourth match on. But other than that, I'm doing fine. How are you, Alex?
I'm doing well, thank you. We've got a lot to get to, haven't we? Plenty of darts to catch up on over the weekend. You're going to hear from two of the people that were involved at the weekend. You're going to hear from the legend John Gwynne, who was back in the commentary box for the World Seniors. You're also going to hear from the newest winner on the PDC Tour as far as the senior circuit, Luke Humphries, coming up later on. But let's start with the World Seniors Championship. It was the first one that we've had, and Robert Thornton picking up the title, beating Martin Adams 5-1 in the final on Sunday night. And we can talk about his performances over the weekend, but also where Robert Thornton goes from here. The all-time great is one of our questions of the week. Will Robert Thornton be a PDC tour card holder in 2023? What do you reckon?
Well, I mean, I thought he would be one this year and therefore wouldn't have been able to win the World Seniors because I did tip him at Q School and he didn't play anywhere near his best at Q School. And I mean, obviously also didn't play anywhere near his best for most of the weekend, but he didn't have to. He still played pretty well, averaged low 90s throughout the week, only player to average over 90 across the entire tournament. 3.5 sets into the final, he was averaging closer to 100. He was averaging the high 90s before they both missed a bunch of darts at double in one leg, and then Thornton went in a little bit of a rough patch as he closed in on the finish line, missed a bunch of doubles. And in the end, he averaged over 6 sets, just under 93. But, that's a standard that will get, especially over 6 sets, that will make you competitive on the Pro Tour. And if you're competitive on the Pro Tour, then you should be able to win a tour card at Q School or through the Challenge Tour if he does well at the remainder of Challenge Tour events. I do think there's still a game in Robert Thornton, and I thought that before this weekend just helped prove that there was still that fight in him and that still that desire to win. But he was clearly the class player in this field. Heading in, there were only a few players who I thought had a realistic chance, Thornton included. And some of those other players like Phil Taylor, it was because I didn't know what to expect from him. I didn't expect him to look as poorly as he did in that first match against Peter Manley. I didn't expect him to roll over like he did against Kevin Painter. He never rolls over against Kevin Painter. It's Painter that rolls over against Taylor usually. But Taylor was not up to it. And none of the other legends were real. And by legends, I mean players who are actually retired. None of them seemed up for it, except at times maybe Terry Jenkins showed some flashes, but nothing like what Robert Thornton showed. Robert Thornton was clearly the class of this field, and even beyond that, still has that drive and desire to be a tour card holder. But will he be? I don't know, because I thought he'd be this year, and there were plenty of other people I thought would win tour cards one way or another who didn't, and there are people who I didn't really know anything about who did, and that will always be the case. He still has the game, not just to be a tour card holder next year, but to hold his own and compete to qualify for the World Championships. He nearly qualified for the Players' Championship finals last year, even though he didn't have a tour card. I think Robert Thornton will have a card next year. He's still good enough. He still can compete at the highest level or thereabouts. But will he? I just don't know.
It is a difficult question to answer, isn't it? And looking at how the vote in our poll is going at the moment, it's going to be open for the rest of the week, so get involved on Twitter if you haven't already. But 53% of you going with yes, we will see Robert Thornton back on the tour next year as a tour card holder. 47% going with no, so it's pretty close at the moment. A few of our listeners getting in touch as well, where Warren Allsworth saying no, only because I think he'll dominate the seniors that much. He'll choose to stay on that circuit. He's still more than capable to be on the tour mind. And yeah, like you say, I think he's definitely capable of being in amongst that 128 players on the tour. Maybe he just needs that little bit of luck. I was actually looking back at his results at Q School a few weeks ago now, and in the final stage he lost 3 games 6-5, the other games 6-4, and some of those 6-5s as well with the games against Dan Reed, who took out a 1-6-1, a 12 darter to hold in the last leg. And the game against Mickey Mansell, Robert Thornton was 4-3 up. Mickey Mansell goes 14, 11, 12 and ends up averaging 108 to beat Robert Thornton 6-4. So there were some impressive performances coming back at Robert Thornton, but looking at how he performed at the weekend, he threw the first darts of the tournament on Thursday night against Bob Anderson, and he ended up throwing the final darts as well, which is always a good sign and a good place to be when you're throwing the final darts of a tournament. And he's definitely got more in the tank, hasn't he? He's 54 and he's achieved a lot in the game. He's won the World Masters, he's won 2 other major titles in the PDC. He's now got this World Seniors title under his belt, and he's probably achieved more than, 95% of all the other players that we've seen compete on TV over the years. So he's put together a very good career, and he still wants more. He's still hungry to get back on the tour, and like Warren said, maybe he is going to dominate the seniors, win the other few events that they've got lined up for this year, and maybe he'll think, you know what, I'm going to stick with this and pick up the big pots of prize money that they are offering. I think it was 30 grand for the winner of this event, which isn't a bad weekend's work, is it, for him? So we'll see if he wants to go back to Q School next year and try and give it another go, because we know that if you do get your tour card, it's unlikely you're going to be able to play in this World Seniors. Now, we may see, if that does happen, Thornton wins his tour card back, we may see the PDC do what they did with the WDF and say, you can go and defend your title. We're not going to fine you. We're going to let you play in it. We don't know the answer to that yet. It's still a long way off, and Q School's a long way off, isn't it? We're talking the best part of a year away. So form can change between now and then. As you mentioned, he'll be on the Challenge Tour for the rest of the year. So if he can pick up his form there, get some titles there, we could be seeing him climb those rankings and maybe push towards that top spot, because there's still a lot of the season to play in the Challenge Tour this year. But it'll take a lot from the weekend. Performing like that on TV, okay, it wasn't as high pressure as it is on the Challenge Tour and on the main PDC circuit, but to beat those calibre of players and some of the performances that he put in as well, for the most part, he was averaging in the 90s, and there was some good darts in that as well. A lot of sets where he reeled off 15, 14, 13 darts back to back to back, and in the final as well, that first set averaging 118 for the first set. So we know that the game is there for Robert Thornton. He is now the World Seniors champion, and yes, it's a long way off, but if he can perform like that and keep pushing, we could see him back on the tour next year.
That's interesting to hear the comment that Warren had back from when I was on Twitter. He's one of the people whose opinion I really respected and always thought was well thought out. But in this case, I disagree with him. I think Robert Thornton, if he has the opportunity, absolutely still wants to try to compete at the highest level. But I could be wrong. And if I'm wrong, it won't be the first time Warren is right and I was wrong about something. But as now, after this past weekend, the first ever World Senior Championships is in the books. How would you rate the first offering from World Senior Starts?
Well, let's first address the elephant in the room, and that is the production side of it, which for the opening night on Thursday, it's got to be said, was hugely disappointing. The scoreboard went missing for most of the night, which was the main issue, I think, for a lot of people, and especially when it was up against the opening night of the Premier League. I know I was flicking between the two channels. I know a lot of our listeners were doing the same, trying to keep up with both darts that were going on that night. And when you're going back to the World Seniors and there's a scoreboard missing, it is hard to catch up with what the score is and where you are in the game. So that was really disappointing to start off like that. But it's got to be said as well that the coverage, as far as the production side of things, did improve as the week went on the Friday, and then particularly on the Saturday and the Sunday. I caught most of Saturday night and Sunday's play, and the coverage was a lot better, which is what you want to see with this event. And as an event overall, I think it's been a welcome addition to the darts calendar. Burton, you spoke with Bob Anderson last week on the show before he was going to play in the World Seniors Championship, open the show up against Robert Thornton, and he was the last winner of a seniors event on TV, that League of Legends 2008. So 14 years between the two events. It's been a long time coming to have something like this back on the darts calendar, and I don't think Bob or any of the other players are going to have to wait 14 years, because I think it is here to stay. And when we spoke with Jason Francis when this event first got launched 9-10 months ago, there's been a lot of planning since then to get it to where it was this past weekend, get it off the ground. And he said that a lot of the players, some of them are going to come back just for a one-off, just to say thank you to the fans. And we saw with John Lowe, after his game, he said, this might be the last time you see me on this stage, so he might be one that we maybe don't see in the tournament next year. And maybe there's a few others that we saw in the field that got invites that think, okay, this probably isn't for me. And the most high profile of them all, Phil Taylor, touched on his performances at the weekend. We didn't know what Phil Taylor we were going to get. Unfortunately for him and his fans, it wasn't the Phil Taylor we were expecting or they would have been wanting to see. He went out in the quarterfinals and those 280 averages, but he'll know what this event is all about. He'll know what the World Seniors Tour is all about now, and who knows, he's going to be involved in the next two events, so you'd like to think that he's going to put the hours in and come back next time and maybe dish out some of those beatings that he did to some of those players in the past and get his own back. We'll see how that goes. But as far as an event, I think it was a success, and the Circus Tavern atmosphere that does produce that, I guess, authentic old school darts atmosphere that a lot of those players involved will remember from going to the Circus Tavern and venues like that back in the day. And it looked like it was sold out for the most part. There weren't many empty seats. So I think they've done a great job, and we'll see how it progresses over the next few months. They've got two more events later this year. If they can get them on TV and keep pushing it, and I think we'll see the standard go up as well as more players get involved and players maybe put a bit more time and effort into it. We'll see the standard go up. So for me, for a first one, I think it's a thumbs up. And yeah, the only downside for me was that production on the first night, but they did rescue that for the rest of the tournament.
Yeah, and I think I was going to comment on the production as well, and I agree. I think it went up over the course of the event, and I was not one of the people changing back and forth between the two because I was more watching the World Seniors. I didn't see much of the Premier League on Thursday, which will make it a little bit difficult when we get to the question about how we thought the new format was, because I was more interested in the novelty of the World Seniors because many of these players I did not grow up with because I didn't grow up with darts. As I've said before on the show, my first time watching darts was the 2012 World Championship when Adrian Lewis retained his title, beating Andy Hamilton in the final. Andy Hamilton might be someone we see in this going forward. And few people from that field that year are now were in or eligible for the World Seniors, or more than a few, I should say, including the winner, Robert Thornton. So I didn't grow up with darts. So I don't have, even the 2008 event on Setanta, I've never seen Bob Anderson play except YouTube videos. John Lowe, the same thing. So for me, this was not a trip down memory lane, but this was a trip to see players that I never got the chance to see play. And overall, in fact, I actually thought the quality was a little better than I thought it would be. I thought the average would be around about 80, and it was 80, a little over 82 in the end. I expected better from Phil Taylor, but I expected worse from, and no offense, like Bob Anderson and John Lowe. I thought we would see averages in the 60s. I don't think we saw any average in the 60s. We came close, but due to injury, Alan Warner Little didn't even manage to get into the 60s. He was in the 50s. But I did expect there would be quite a few players who just were nowhere near presentable, and most of them, even though they were struggling at times, were presentable, and that kept the average a little bit higher in the end. I thought they did, for a bunch of people who don't have much experience putting on an event, I thought overall they did a good job putting the World Senior Championships together, and the production, especially after that first day, was presentable. There were still some hiccups. Bobby George did not seem to be at his top of his game like he used to be in commentary, or not, I shouldn't say commentary, but in presenting events like he did in the World Championships on BBC for so long. But overall, I thought it was a pretty good first offering. But whether it can sustain an entire tour is another question. I could see the World Senior Championships continuing as an event each year, but I'd be very surprised if it will get the same attention as it did. And I expect that the entire tour, even if the quality does improve somewhat, won't be of interest to most people like the World Senior Championships might be.
And now move on to our first guest on this week's show. It is with the legendary commentator himself, John Gwynne.
I'm joined today by the legendary commentator, John Gwynne. John, how are you?
I'm not too bad, thank you, Burton, and fresh from my stint on Sunday at the seniors competition down in the Circus Tavern. Still buzzing, I think, because I really enjoyed it.
And that's, in fact, where we'll start out. As you said, you were there on commentary on the Sunday in Purfleet for the World Seniors Championships, and you were there to call as Robert Thornton won the final against Martin Adams. How impressed were you with Robert's run to the title?
Oh, very impressed. I mean, obviously, I saw 1 or 2 games on telly anyway before I went down to the southeast. Yes, I was very impressed. And then when I got there, Robert was absolutely delighted to see me, and so many others were as well. I cannot emphasize the warmness of the welcome I got. I cannot emphasize it enough. Everybody made me so welcome. I really felt a part of a family, the darting family. And there were players, there were people on the production team, and there were people from the congregation, the audience, who were coming up and having photographs taken and all the rest. It really was. But to get back to your original question, yes, Robert was definitely the best player in the tournament, and therefore deservedly the winner. Played consistently well throughout, and deservedly as the inaugural champion.
Well, let's touch on the runner-up, Martin Adams. Of course, the seniors is open to players aged 50 and above, and Martin certainly fits that category at 65, and he's still making finals and showing his class. How does Wolfie's CV stack up with the rest of the best players there's been to do it?
There isn't a player I admire more in darts than Martin Adams. There was a time, of course, during the dispute when things were a little bit sort of fractious, not between me and Martin necessarily, but because he was the representative as captain of England and the main man, if you like, the representative for all the players on that side of the dispute. I was piggy in the middle in that I was broadcasting on both World Championships from 93 onwards. From when I started at the Circus Tavern, I'd already done 3 or 4 World Championships at the Lakeside for BBC Radio. So I was working for 2 different media in that in BBC Radio on the BDO event and Sky on the PDC event, or WDC as it was at the time. When I went across to Frimley Green, not all the players made me entirely welcome, not just players but officials and others. It was quite awkward at times because I'd just come off doing a week of Sky Sports and really praising all those players, of course, who were regarded as renegades and all sorts of other names that I probably can't mention in an interview. But and I was going back to the original one, and whilst many accepted me and recognised that I was a working journalist, others did think that I was, part of the opposition and treated me thus. I'm not saying that Martin himself was anything like that. But of course, he was in an awkward position, and he, in a way, had to obviously represent his side. He was the captain of England. He was the main man. But we've always got on, and certainly since the dispute was completed, and this applies to a lot of players who played in the BDO. Kevin Painter was a good example. Andy Fordham, lots of people who were great friends who were a little bit reticent when I was around during the dispute. Anyway, as I get back to the point about Martin Adams, and I've got nothing but admiration for the man, because what he's achieved in the latter part of his career is far and beyond what he achieved in the height of his career, when you would have expected him to be winning world titles and all the rest of it. But to win 3 World Masters on the trot, and then to win 3 World Championships within 5 years, I think it was. Anyway, it was within a short space of time. And he dominated the BDO side of the game. And that takes some doing because Barney was around. Barney had his moments, of course. So Martin Adams is not only now a great friend, and I've done exhibition work with him. Always enjoyed doing exhibitions with Martin. And seeing him again at the weekend and playing so well, brilliant.
You mentioned, of course, the dispute. A lot of highlights of the weekend. One, of course, would be seeing players play against each other who never had the chance. Also, Bob Anderson's finger point after the 180, Kevin Painter's 170 finish. What were your highlights from the weekend?
You've more or less hit the nail on the head with those, but there was a brilliant bull finish by Terry Jenkins. His partner his opponent had already had a shot at double, and Terry was on 91. His first dart went in 25, his second dart went in 16, and his third dart went in the bull. So it was the bull hitting the bull when he was in a tight corner, and of course that's the way to go. If you're in the between 90 and 95, between 91 and 95, then go for the bull. If you hit the bull, you're on a good two-darter, and if you hit the 25, as Terry illustrated, you just want a single number and the bull. So that was one particular highlight on the hockey. Certainly, and he's another great guy, Terry, who actually... I don't remember seeing him at all during the dispute. He seemed to appear from nowhere in the early part of the millennium, and rose to the top very, very quickly with some fine performances in the World Match Play in particular. So other highlights. Well, it's always difficult, but that you've mentioned the 170 of Kevin Painter. Lovely to watch. Kevin threw very well at times, and then he blew hot and cold. That's the best way I can put it, and I think he would agree, because when he was defeated, he came up to the players' room where I was sitting and others, and he said, "I just threw terribly. I've been throwing well all week, and I threw terrible." And actually, he didn't throw as badly as he had assumed. But when you lose a game, you probably remember your bad darts. I've played darts myself for numerous years. And I know that when you lose, particularly an important game, you don't want to dwell on what you did well, because you know there were things you didn't do well. And I think Kevin was like that. He was in that situation. But the nice thing is that he will be back. There'll be other tournaments still. And I think all these players have got a taste for it. There's a hint that John Lowe may have played his last game professionally. I don't know whether he'll turn up or enter the other ones that are coming up. Seniors, but I know Bob Anderson will be, with that 180 and the point, and brilliant moments those we thought we'd never see again. And I know how much these lads have looked forward to this tournament and being on television again. The person I feel sorry for is Keith Deller, who I didn't see his final game, his last game, the quarterfinal, I think it was, but he was disappointed with his performance. But he'll practice and he'll come back. He's a realist. I saw him at breakfast the following morning, and he'd got over it, and he'll be back. And Keith's capable of doing very, very well. May have had a little bit of nerves, although he shouldn't have done, but he may have had a little bit of nerves. It can hit all players at any time, particularly when they haven't played on the stage for so long. So, yeah, there were... And we've got to say a word as well for the female players, who are always welcome, in my view, into these tournaments. those with ability. Dita was disappointed with her performance, but Dita dusts herself down and gets up and carries on. And Lisa Ashton is Lisa Ashton. She's the most laid-back darts player almost that I know. And she will come back and she will throw brilliantly. And, of course, there are others as well. So yes, it's a good tournament, and I hope that all the older players, John Lowe's only 3 months younger than me, so he's old, and he'll admit it. I hope to see him again.
Now, let's go back in time. We last had you on the show in the summer of 2020 when darts returned to our screens with the World Match Play, and not long after you returned with a darts gig yourself, presenting a drive-in darts show up in Scotland. What was that experience like?
Well, yes, that was a bit different. It was in Dalkeith, just south of Edinburgh, in a park there. And they had an England versus Scotland event on, which was good. It was a friendly, if there can be such a thing, when England play Scotland. But we had players. I know Adrian Lewis took part, Martin Adams took part, and we had some fun. The Scottish lads. Actually, off the top of my head, I'm trying to think who was taking part for Scotland and England. As I say, I've mentioned two, but I know their name. I know their names will come to me in due course. But it was good fun, and they were all great mates. I've seen them all, and yes, that was a bit of fun, and it was different. People drove in and they watched the darts from their cars, and thankfully it wasn't raining, although we were actually undercover on the darts. It was like it was almost like a tent we were playing in, raised up with the stage raised up and the board and everything there in the little compound. It was a good experience. I enjoyed it. Alan Souter was one of the Scottish players, and he's done well. He's come across to the PDC now, as many have been forced to, really. Alan Souter did very, very well recently, didn't he, in a competition? Was it the World Grand Prix? The World Championship, it was indeed, the World Championship itself. And he was one of the Scottish lads that took part.
Now, late on in 2020, you posted on Twitter that you had scans at the hospital and had discovered a tumor. We've seen since then all the overwhelming support from the darts family. First, can you give us an update on how your health is now? And second, just how much has the support from friends, family, and the darting community meant?
When I was told in November of 2020 that I had cancer and that I wasn't going to be cured, which is another way of saying it's terminal, I was stunned and stung. And I was disoriented for a time. I didn't quite know what to make of it. Of course, eventually I had to come to terms with it and accept all the various tablets and pills and medicines that I was going to have to take, and the treatment I was going to have to undergo. And the specialist at my local hospital, Tameside Hospital in Greater Manchester, said to me, "We can help you if you want by arranging for you to have treatment." And he said, "Whilst we can't tell you that we're going to cure you, we can give you a better life and a longer life than if we don't send you for treatment." Well, when you get that option, there's only one answer. And I said, whatever treatment you can find me. And he was referring to the excellent cancer hospital in Manchester, the Christie. And And I said, yes, I'll accept any treatment that I can. Now, before I go any further, I'd never been in the Christie before, even though I actually knew it. I lived about a mile away when I was younger and used to deliver papers close by in South Manchester. And so obviously I was aware of it. And it was much smaller in those days than it is now. It's a massive place. But I'd never been in the Christie. And the funny thing is that on February the 14th, very early in the year in 2020, a month or more before Boris said we've got to do something about Cardiff, and he closed the country down. We had our first ever lockdown. So I'd gone in on that day because I do a lot of work with the Manchester City former players who turn out and play in charity football matches and raise money for good causes. And they raised money for the Christie, and we went along and presented the cheque to the Christie. And that was the first time I ever went in. I was on the microphone and comparing this presentation of the cheque. There were quite a number of former City players. Peter Barnes, former England player, was there, and Michael Brown, who played for City and Spurs and Sheffield United and various other teams. Very good player. There were so many. The star player who was there was Colin Bell, who was a Manchester City legend. Played in the great era of Joe Mercer and Malcolm Allison when they were in charge, and City were one of the top teams in the country back in the late 60s and early 70s. And Colin Bell was a star player, played for England many times. And Colin Bell had he had his career cut short by injury, but he was a wonderful player in the era of Francis Lee, Mike Summerby, and so many other fine City players. They won the second division, then they won the first division, then they won the FA Cup. Then the following year, they were the first English team to win a domestic trophy in the League Cup and the European trophy. They won the European Cup Winners' Cup. So they were a top side, and Colin Bell was one of the stars, if not the star of the team. And his son, John Bell, Dr. John Bell, is a radiologist, and a very fine one, and in charge of the radiology unit at the Christie. So it made sense for Colin to present this cheque to his son on behalf of the Manchester City former players. Not that he played, because obviously he was in his 70s. But some of the players who played in the team were there. And we did the presentation. And that was my first visit to the Christie. Now, little did I realise that within a year I would be in that place having chemotherapy, and also within the year Colin Bell would have passed away. He passed away in the following January, 11 months later, after being ill, and that was a very sad time. And I became a patient receiving chemotherapy at the Christie. You cannot legislate for what lies ahead of you in life, can you?
So I underwent a number of weeks of chemotherapy. I missed one or two because it made me so ill, and I lost so much weight they wouldn't actually do it 1 week. But anyway, I went through 7 hits, if you like, of chemotherapy, and then you have to undergo scans and that, and they'll examine the outcome and that. And then I underwent 10 days, 11 days on the trot of radiotherapy at the end of May. That was then followed by immunology treatment. That was to help boost my immune system, which had been weakened seriously. But I went through it all, and I stayed as upbeat as I could. I won't admit defeat. I feel a lot better, certainly. I've been going to football matches, although I haven't covered games for Sky for some time now, since the end of 2020. But I've got to go to the Etihad. My favourite team is City, and they look after me in that I've always had complimentary tickets since 2010 because of what I do voluntarily for the old boys and for the grassroots football in Greater Manchester, raising money through sportsmen's dinners and like which I will MC, and for a modest fee rather than a normal fee, and I'm rewarded. I've been rewarded 1 million times over because I get complimentary tickets to City's home games. All I have to do is contact the club and say, can I have 3 tickets, like whatever match, and yes, and I pick them up when I arrive there. So I'm very lucky in that regard. I still get to the matches when I can. I don't go if the weather's oppressively bad or if I'm oppressively ill. That makes sense. But generally I wrap myself up and I go. And so really it's a case now. All my treatment is basically over, although only in January I had a snap. Two hits of radiotherapy. They felt that it was necessary to do that to keep 1 or 2 tumours at bay, and so I was glad that happened. I stayed in hospital overnight, and that was back in January. But since then, I've gradually got better and got over those 2 periods, because they do affect you, and really looked forward to the darts on at the weekend at the Circus Tavern, and I've got another darts event coming up. I hope I'm well enough. It's to MC the Highley Masters in Shropshire, which is my native county. That's where I was born and brought up as a little boy. So I'll be staying overnight and going on Sunday to visit relatives and to visit my parents' graves and that, and then drive up to Manchester, and life goes on. Day by day I try and be as normal as possible, and I know people will be glad to hear I'm not in any pain. I'm enjoying life, and every morning I get up and darn well live. That's what I do, and I hope I can continue doing that for a long, long time. But I've got to say, the support that I receive from round and about and on social media as well, in all sorts of ways, is absolutely amazing, and it does give you one heck of a lift.
Glad to hear that you're continuing that fight, and we've got a couple of listener questions that have come in before we let you go, and the first one comes from David Kent, who says, what does John think is his best ever darts commentary call?
It's probably something I've completely forgotten. Obviously I will be remembered for, and I think I remember certainly the Taylor Barney game in 2007, and the last ever dart that was thrown in the Circus Tavern in the PDC World Championship was Barney's double top, and me going, and Barnevelt is the champion of the world, and that was the decisive part after 2 3/4 hours of absolutely amazing darts. The Taylor 3-0 up, and we all thought it was going to be an absolute flop, 7-0, 7-1, whatever. But then Barney somehow found it from somewhere and burst back into the game. I'd seen him do it earlier in the year in the World Grand, in the Desert Classic. Funnily enough, in the semi-final he played Phil Taylor. He was 2-0 down, and looking like a defeated man. And then suddenly he burnt into life and won the match 4-3 in sets, and got to the final. Well, actually, he lost to John Part, but we'd seen it from Barney earlier before, and he knocked Taylor out of the UK Open as well at Bolton. Now, I enjoyed that commentary because that's legs only. That's legs. That's match play. The UK Open set play as against match play is, of course, very different. You can go 6-0 up in match play and you've sailed away. You've got a handsome lead. You can win the first 6 legs at set play and you're only 2-0 up. I say only, it's a nice position to be in, but you're still within reach. So it's a big difference. But to answer the question, I think also that wonderful semi-final in '97 when Taylor played Bristow and Sid and I were doing the game at Bristow, we expected Taylor to roll him over. Bristow still had dartitis for all that he'd reached the semi-final. And we thought Taylor, well, if Bristow had hit a certain double 8 at a certain time, and he told me this, he said I'd have beaten him. There's no question, he said, I know I had him. If I'd have pinned that, I'd have had him. Anyway, he didn't, and Taylor in the end won an absolute epic. One of the best semi-finals we've seen, although there have been some crackers over the years. Matches between Taylor and Priestley as well at times were absolutely magical because Dennis at his best he went with Phil. He could go with him. What Phil would do, though, eventually break him, as he did with all the players he played against. If they were showing resistance, eventually he would break them. And, of course, in the longer term, he would break them entirely. And that's what he did with Barney, and that's what he did with Dennis Priestley, and that's what he did with Peter Manley, and that's what he did with Rod Harrington. Eventually, they got to the point where they knew they couldn't beat him. And it was only, I remember, one competition it was when the Premier League had started, and I think it was back in 2008, and James Wade beat Taylor in a Premier League game. It was the first game he'd lost in 2 or 3 seasons. And there was a feeling then, and ever since then, gradually, through the players, that Taylor there might just be chinks in his armour, and if you can put him under pressure, you might have a chance. And that's what happened. Eventually, because Michael van Gerwen came along and challenged Taylor's position and title as the best player ever, and there was a gradual change. Now it's changed amazingly because now, although it was assumed Van Gerwen would be the number one and would reign and rule in the same way that Taylor had, he hasn't been allowed to because that magnificent Welshman, Gerwyn Price, or Garwin Price, I have to say it. I can't understand why it's so important to spell or to pronounce the Welsh names correctly without pronouncing all the others, like Michael van Gerwen. Wayne's a great pal of mine, and he'll smile at this, but I find it hard to understand why we can't say Michael van Gerwen, or whatever it should be. If you're going to pronounce these names absolutely correctly and in their language, then do it for all of them, not just Garwin Price. I can speak Welsh if you want me to. But, yes, I've got Welsh heritage, and I'm quite well up on the Welsh language, you know. There's no such letter as V. Did you know that? And the V sound is represented by a single F. So when you see a single F in Welsh, it's not, it's the. The strong F sound is represented by two Fs together. Now then, there's a little lesson for you. Anyway, to answer the lad's question, and I appreciate his question, frankly, I can't remember what my best ever commentary was. Probably it was that Barneveld game, but it was also many other tight games that, that have gone on over the years. Absolutely loved it. I really did. I loved a good tight game, one that you could get yourself wrapped up in, And if I can get myself wrapped up in a game, then I have to go and sit down for 20 minutes after it's finished and find normality.
Well, we've got.
So what's the next question?
It's not really a question, but it's a message that's come in from someone that you'll know, John O'Shea, who you were at the Circus Tavern with the last time that you went there, and he said, "Send in my regards. When I look back on the 2019 Masters final, his commentary plays a huge role in making it awesome. Such a gentleman, such a voice in darts."
Yeah, that's lovely from John. He's a great lad. And it was nice to see him and so many others there, but it was particularly nice to see him at the start, when I got there and he was in it. He was still in the quarterfinals, I think. I didn't know he was going to win it, and I didn't assume that he would, because Scott Waits was in it and lots of good players in it. And for him to go through and win that final against Scott Waits, it was a brilliant match. And John O'Shea proved that he can throw a mean dart, and of course he's done well in getting a tour card. That's a wonderful feat, and he's going to be warmly welcomed onto the circuit, because he's a character. And he'll beat some good players, and he'll lose to some average players. He knows that. He's been in darts long enough. And when it's your day, it's your day, and when it's not, it's not. But he'll win more than he loses, and he'll, as I say, he'll be a great addition to the PDC family. And good luck to him. Nice of him to get in touch.
Definitely. Well, John, it's a pleasure to chat to you. Really appreciate you taking out so much of your time to chat with us, and we wish you all the best, all of our listeners, myself and Burton, on your continued recovery, and we look forward to hearing you in the commentary box very soon again.
Keep taking the pills, keep taking note of the medics, and get up every morning and live. That's what I'm going to do.
Thanks again to John for joining us. Now on to the PDC, and this past weekend we saw the Pro Tour return for the first time this year, and a first senior PDC title for Luke Humphries, winning Players Championship 1 on Saturday. How far can Cool Hand go this season?
I mean, I think the better question is, what can't he accomplish this season? Because I think it's all to play for Luke. He's really come on strides the last couple of years. Obviously, those runs at the World Championships brought him into the limelight. But even since then, making Pro Tour finals last year, making the UK Open final, and just getting more consistent both on stage and off of it, saw him qualify for all the majors last year and move into that top 20 in the world. The only thing he hadn't yet done is win a title. Okay, fine, he hasn't also won the World Championship, stuff like that, but he hadn't won a title of any sort at the senior level before. Now he's done that, and he beat one of the players who, like him, had the breakthrough last year in that final. So I think now it's really just, what can't he accomplish? He's obviously one of the best players in the world, and now he knows how to cross the line at the end of the tournament to be the champion. Will he win a televised title? I don't know, but it wouldn't really surprise me if he did. It wouldn't surprise me if he goes one better at the UK Open than he did last year. It wouldn't surprise me if he did it in one of the more long-form events, like the World Match Play or the World Grand Prix, because I think he has that staying power in his game to stay at a consistent mid to high 90s level for 25 legs like he would need to win one of those matches and to win one of those titles. I think every tournament he'll be going into thinking that he can win the title. At the very least, he should be making a deep run. That said, I don't know if he'll have that breakthrough. I really still think that Michael Smith will win at least 2 major televised titles, even though he didn't have the best of weekends at the first 2 Players' Championship events and obviously as well at the Premier League. I think we'll see Peter Wright and Gerwyn Price continue to be the 2 leading players in darts. Michael Van Gerwen maybe will pop back up. Johnny Clayton might kick on as well. That doesn't leave many events left for Luke to be the winner at, but he obviously has the game. It wouldn't surprise me if he stole a major at some time this year, and more weeks or more days like he had on Saturday, stealing won't be the right word. It'll be just winning like it is for everyone else at the top of the game when they do what we expect of them.
Can't argue with that. And with Luke Humphries, this is a player that you can tell is on that upward trajectory. He's going in only one direction as far as his career, as far as the rankings. He's up to number 18 in the world now. He's getting close to that top 16. And you look back to 2020, there's not really a lot for him to defend. He only made his debut in the World Match Play last year, debut in the World Grand Prix, the European Championship. So he's going to be in all of those events again this year. That's all money that is going to be added on to his world ranking. So you expect him to get into the top 16 sooner rather than later, maybe at some point in the first half of the year, maybe second half of the year, but you expect it to happen this year. And it is a case of how far can he push up in those rankings? Can he push even further, get in the top 10, top 8? I think one thing we can say is we are going to see a lot of Luke Humphries this year. We are going to see him in virtually all the TV events aside from the Premier League and the World Series as well. Unless he gets an invite to that, we are going to see him in all the other events and the European Tour as well. We're not going to see him in the first one, but the title win that he had, he was around about the 15-16 mark on the Pro Tour top 16. He's now up to number 9 in that list, so he's looking good to be seeded for the European Tours going forward. And he is a player that thrives on the big stage. He loves performing on the stage. He's made 3 quarterfinals of the World Championship. You mentioned the UK Open final last year, which was without the crowd there, but the last 3 times that we've had fans at Ali Pali, he's made the quarterfinals. The 1 year in between when we didn't have any fans, he went out in the first round. But he has pushed on since that defeat to Paul Lim and the UK Open final, the 4 finals that he made last season. He is pushing in that direction. And he said after his win against Chris Dobie at the World Championship at the end of last year that he thought he had a shot at getting in the Premier League. And I did as well. I thought if he'd have beaten Gary Anderson in that quarterfinal, that could have been enough for him. And even when it got to the Masters, he had chances to beat Michael Van Gerwen in that last 16 game. If he'd have done that, maybe we'd have been talking about Luke Humphries last week as a Masters finalist or even a Masters winner. You don't know. But yeah, like you, I think he is heading towards maybe a major title this year. Might be too soon, but who knows? He's definitely got the game, and we saw that with the run that he had to the title at the weekend. A lot of top performances there, high 90s, low 100 averages. If you're doing that, you are going to be dangerous and you are going to be competitive in this field. And the more experience he gets, he's going to get a lot more stage experience this year. As I said, with the Euro Tour and TV, he's going to be a real danger. And I think it is maybe this year, maybe next year. I do think we're going to see him in more major finals and pushing towards the top 8.
Now, I have 7 names written down for this next question, so you haven't stolen all my notes. But we have another title for Peter Wright, winning Players' Championship number 2 on Sunday to draw even closer to the man he beat in the final for world number 1. But aside from those 2 title winners, did anyone else catch your eye at the weekend in Barnsley?
Well, I'm just counting the names that I've got on my piece of paper here. I've got 7 names, so you're going to be sweating a little bit before I say the first name to see if I've got all 7. But the first one, it is, of course, your namesake, Stephen Burton, who got to his first quarterfinal on the Players' Championships. And this is a player that, at the moment, doesn't even have a tour card. He got a call-up as the 6th player on the Challenge Tour Order of Merit. And I think there are a couple of players that, unfortunately, pulled out due to COVID late on last week. So he was one of the late call-ups to be the beneficiary of those 2 players dropping out. So he was able to get in the field. And not many players can say that they can beat Raymond van Barneveld and Michael Van Gerwen in back-to-back games. But that is what he did on the way to getting to that quarter-final. And not huge finishes that he was taking out against these players, but they're the sort of finishes that when you look back on games, when you're taking out an 80 with your last dart, 62 with your last dart. You're only getting 1 or 2 darts at a double. They can be the difference in those games. And he was taking them out against Barney. He was taking them out against Michael, and 2 big scouts for him. And so, as I say, someone without a tour card, he definitely caught the eye. And sticking with that theme of players that don't have a tour card at the moment, one who's in a prime position in February to get a tour card, still a long way to go. But Scott Williams, who we spoke to on the show a few weeks ago, top of the Challenge Tour, he had a few decent results at the weekend. I think it was a 102 average, a 95 average. He was on the stream at one point as well, looking in good form, and good to see him get a few wins. Got to give a mention to Gary Anderson. He was looking really sharp. He didn't go deep into the events, didn't get to like a semi-final or a final. He had a quarter-final in the last 64, but his first 9 average, 111, the scoring power was definitely there for him at the weekend. And in all 7 of his matches, 95 plus average. This is someone that drops in and out of the Pro Tours. We don't see him playing in all the events, but I think we're seeing with this Premier League this year that when you're playing week in, week out, I think he does want to play a little bit more this year. And the Pro Tours, as far as the Players' Championships, they're where we are going to see him more often than not. And to put in those level of performances, that's a good sign for him going into the Premier League. And the last player I'll mention is going to have to be Boris Kirchmar, a first Players' Championship semi-final for him, second on the very early averages for the Players' Championships this year, 99.34. Lost to Johnny Clayton on the Saturday with a 100 average. But after that, some superb stuff on the Sunday, 100, 105, 97, 96, 98, a lot of top averages. Okay, lost 7-0 to Gerwyn Price in the semi-final, but you'd have snapped your hand off for a semi-final at the start of the day, and that's another step in the right direction for him.
Yeah, and I'll just say it was actually a false alarm. I had my mobile on my notes, and I actually had 8 names written down. One of them was covered up. So there's at least always going to be one person I could talk about. And why not? I'll start with the person who I forgot to count because of not seeing him, and that's someone who lost both matches. But I'm going to throw him out anyway. I'm in fact going to mention 2 people who lost both of their matches. Actually, let me take it back. I'm mentioning 3 people who lost both their matches because I do want to at least talk about them. And the one I had covered up was James Wilson. And that's because it's covered up just because that's where my mobile was. But I had him on my list because last year he got really unlucky. And that's why he was had to go to the PDPA qualifier, even though he was in the top. I think he finished 33rd in averages in the Players' Championship events. This year, didn't play as well across the first 2, but his opponent's averages are over 97 combined, 5th highest opponent average of anyone. So it seems like James Wilson is still not getting the rub of the green when it comes to the draws. That will change. Even though he didn't have a good weekend, he ran into players who were playing really well. At some point, things will start going well for him because, well, they just have to. He's been playing too well to not eventually get a good day. Watch out for James Wilson to make a quarterfinal or semifinal sometime fairly soon. This weekend aside, he's playing well enough. 2 other players who I had that lost both their matches, Glenn Durrant, a noticeable step up from the form he had last year, averaging over 90 on the Saturday, tailed off a little bit on the Sunday, but still much improved on what he was throwing for much of last year, particularly after the Premier League where things just fell apart for him. Still ways to go to get back to the form he was at a year and a half, 2 years ago, but encouraging signs for Duzza. And one other person who lost both their matches and, like James Wilson, is right there near the top, and in fact, even higher up, second in terms of averages thrown against, 99.74 across his 2 matches, and is also in the top 10 in overall averages, Simon Whitlock. Boy, those were 2 difficult draws for the Wizard. Going to last leg deciders on both days. Going 8 legs on the Saturday against Rob Cross, and then a last leg decider against Krzysztof Ratajski, both averaging across high 90s, Ratajski over 100. Very unfortunate from Simon Whitlock, but also 2 really good performances in what is a huge year for the Wizard because as things stand, he's not even in the World Championships, but he's playing at that level that he was played at for much of the last decade. And if he plays like that for the rest of the year, he'll stop that slide and maybe get into the televised events this year. He's currently in a match play spot, but encouraging sign for the Wizard, even though he lost both I had Kersmar on my list as well. You mentioned I had Stephen Burton. I think this is Kersmar's year. I think he's going to break through and really start to do something. He's in the talk for the match play now. And also throw out, Jason Lowe, a board final and a board title over the weekend. Daryl Gurney, a big day on the Saturday. And I also had Roby also for a big day on the Saturday, 102 averages in his first 2 matches. They all caught my eye, but a long season ahead of them, but a good start for those people that I just mentioned.
Some good names there. Well, let's move on to a player that did have a weekend to remember in Barnsley. Here's our chat with the newest winner on the PDC Pro Tour. Here's our chat with Luke Humphries. I'm pleased to say I'm joined by the newest first-time title winner on the Pro Tour, Luke Humphries. Thanks for the time, Luke. How are you doing?
Yeah, thank you very much. Yes, I'm doing well, thanks. It's been a great time for me recently. Obviously, like you just say, picking up that first-ranking title. So, I'm sort of over the moon at the moment.
Well, congratulations on winning your first PDC senior title of the weekend. What have the last few days been like since you added your name to the Roll of Honour?
Yeah, it's been really good. I've had a lot of support and, a lot of people congratulating me, which was nice. And, the day after I actually won, nearly every professional player come up and congratulate me, which was a nice touch from them all. They all said, congratulations, you deserved it. And then people saying, we thought you were going to be the next winner. And that was nice touch from them all to, congratulate me because of, how close I've come in the last 4 finals.
Well, we'll come on to the weekend just gone later, but let's first circle back. We last had you on after you made the UK Open final last year. You made another 3 finals after that last year, and we saw Jose de Souza average just 114 against you. Gerwyn Price beat you in a final. Peter Wright averaged 108 in a final. It took some big performances to stop you winning that first title last year, didn't it?
Yeah, in the 3 finals that I played on the Pro Tour, I didn't really play too bad, to be honest. I thought, people just played their A game, and it was, it was hard to match. But sometimes that can happen in darts, and this time I didn't play his 100% best, and I was always hoping that when I got to that final, someone wouldn't play their best against me, and I was able to, put in a good performance with, a decent 100 average, and it worked out this way this time, and I thought I was quite solid in the final.
Well, after you made your 4th final of the year last year, you mentioned on Twitter that you'd been working with Paul Nicholson and Keith Deller behind the scenes on your game. How did that come about?
Yeah, more so with Paul Nicholson. Keith was sort of more advising me on how to deal with things and, sort of keeping my head focused, whereas Paul was sort of helping me with the technical side and the mental side as well. And, I had a couple of moments last year where I was struggling with my throw, and even though it still looked okay, it was, a bit snatchy, a bit pushy, and then I was losing confidence, and I was working with Paul throughout most of last year and getting my head right and, the throw right and better, and we had a few sessions here and there, focusing on righting the wrongs, really, all the things, bad habits I was doing, removing them, and it obviously seemed to have paid dividends because, the last 12 months, 5 finals, including the UK Open, is quite a success in my opinion. Finally got over the line and won my first one as well, which is, an amazing feeling for me. And I'm hoping now that the floodgates open and I can, keep winning more.
Definitely. When we last spoke, you said that you wanted to play more on the stage, and we saw you make your debuts in the World Match Play, the World Grand Prix, European Championship last year. Touching on the match play, it was an impressive debut, beating James Wade. How did you find that first experience playing at the Winter Gardens?
It was honestly, it was so amazing. It wasn't as hot as I expected the first time. A lot of tips from friends were saying in the professional circuit, saying it's very hot up there. It's hard to deal with, but I didn't find it that hot. It obviously is hot up there, but I didn't find it as bad as what I expected. And I think that I think that can have a little extra edge on you if you can deal with the heat in the match play, because some people do struggle, and I thought that my debut there was a pretty solid one against Christopher in the second round. I thought I played okay, but his finishing was fantastic, and it was a well-deserved win for him. And I'm hoping that this year I can get back there, which I'm in a good position at the moment, Pro Tour Order of Merit. So I'm hoping to get back there and have a good run this year.
Well, there was another milestone on stage last year. You made the semi-finals on the Euro Tour for the first time, the first Euro Tour in Hungary, the first one back after almost a year. What are your memories of that run in Budapest?
I thought I played a great tournament there. I've had some good Euro Tours, and I seem to, I've had quite a bad record of losing a lot of second rounds. And, I was finally got over that line after about 8 tournaments, getting to the third round again. And, I seem to go from strength to strength in that tournament. And against Gern Price, who beat me in the semis, I thought I played a good game, but he was unbelievable that day. I think he, a much deserving winner, and the atmosphere in that Euro Tour was absolutely incredible. Honestly, I think that's probably up there with the best one I've played in, and I'm hoping I'd love to be back again this year. I'm in a good position in the Pro Tour to merit now, so hopefully I can get in quite a few Euro Tours this year, and have another good run, and who knows, maybe win one.
Yeah, we'll come back to the Euro Tour in a moment. And towards the end of last year, you also changed your darts. We know before you used an odd point. What was that adjustment period like, switching to new darts? Did it take much getting used to? Were you wary of changing at first?
Yeah, it was a scary thought for me, because I've always had them darts since I've been a professional, and they were getting worn down, and they were slipping out my hands, and I think the grip had gone for me, which was the main reason for my change. And it was a scary thought, because you're never sure if you're going to pick up another set of darts and feel the same way as I did with them. I felt quite elite at the start with them darts. I worked well with Lee Huxtable at Red Dragon and trying to get a new set made that were quite similar. These ones feel great. I think they even feel in a way better than the first time I ever picked up the original sets I had 5 years previous. And I did say in my PDC interview in the World Championships that I think these darts could take me to the next level, and I feel like I'm starting to slowly show that with the win last weekend. So yeah, at the start it was a scary prospect, because I didn't know if I could play with another set, because you always worry about that. But honestly, I think it was the best thing I ever did. I think these could take me to the next level, and put 5% on my game, which is, I think, will take me into that next level of getting in the top 10 region.
Well, we should mention your manufacturer, Red Dragon. This week you signed a new long-term deal with them. They won our Manufacturer of the Year vote from our listeners for last year as well. How much of a support have Red Dragon been for you?
Yeah, it was an amazing feeling for me to sign a big 5-year contract with them. And it was a no-brainer though, because they've been with me since I was not even a professional. I've been with them since before I was even on the Pro Tour, and they stuck by me, and they've helped me as much as they physically can. And I was just said, Lee has been amazing with creating darts. He's shown that through the way he's helped Peter Wright create darts, Gern Price, Johnny Clayton. He's got all these winners from darts that he's created and helped us make. So if anybody's going to propel my game and make me even better than already it can be, it's going to be Red Dragon. And no brainer for me to sign the deal, and they was more than happy that I was signing on the dotted line for another 5 years as well. So I'm looking forward to working with them in the future in Lee, because we've had a good partnership already, and I feel like the next 5 years we'll have an even better one.
We turn the page on 2021, coming into 2022. You're once again involved in the business end of a World Championship, but I've got to touch on that 34-leg epic that you had with Chris Dobie in the last 16, because we thoroughly enjoyed watching it. What was it like to play in a game like that?
Yeah, it was a fantastic game to be involved in. The atmosphere was quite amazing as well, and it was a topsy-turvy game. I think I should have really won the first set. I think I missed a few darts here and there, and then Chris went into that 2-set lead, and I pegged him back a little bit. And then I think in the World Championships this year, I had a lot of sets I went 2-0 up and lost, and I think that 4th set I was 2-0 up in that 4th set, and he brought it back, and went 3-1 up, and I think that's when I relaxed and thought, just let it happen now if it's going to happen. And I threw some great darts, and I had this epic game with Jermaine Wattamina in the 2019 World Championships, and I took a lot of confidence from that game, knowing that I've done it before, I can do it again. And they seem to follow me around these epic games in the Worlds, but it was a fantastic game. It takes two to make a great game, and Chris was fantastic as well. But it's a great feeling winning games like that. It really is.
You said after that game on Sky you felt you had a shot of getting in the Premier League for this year. I said on our show if you'd beat Gary Anderson in the quarterfinals you would be. And how close did you feel you were to getting in this year?
I think I was close to getting in. I probably would have been in the top 12 of players that the PDC would have had on a shortlist, I would say. I think I probably, ideally, reducing it to 8, I probably would have needed to make the final at a minimum to get in. But I think the right selection was made. Maybe Rob Cross was unlucky not to get in, but it's hard for the PDC because you've got about 16 dart players, that are all vying for that place that are good enough to be in it. And when you're whittling it down to 8, it's a tough process for them. I don't envy them trying to pick. You know, it's not easy. You can't blame them. But I like the new format. I think it's a great decision from them. I think the right players, like I said, were picked. You know, it weren't to be last year, but you know, I believe I'll be in there one day. And if I can keep, you know, playing like I am and maybe pick up a major title if I could this year, I could see myself in it next year. And that is my ultimate goal, to play in the Premier League. You know, I feel like I would flourish in it. You know, I will always keep putting my hand up, keep saying I want to be in it. And, you know, they will pick me if I, you know, win that major title, and I believe I can.
Going deep at Ali Pali certainly helps your case, and that's something that you've done in 3 of the last 4 years. The only year that you haven't in the last 4 years, of course, was when there were no fans in the building. So you've made the quarterfinals for the last 3 times when there has been a crowd at Ali Pali. What is it about the stage which brings out the best in you?
Yeah, I think, you know, obviously I love playing up on the big stage, especially with crowds and that. You know, the atmosphere, the adrenaline that it gives you, you know, it's a hard feeling to explain because it's just incredible. But I think that maybe something to do with the set play that possibly could benefit me, maybe. I'm not really sure if it's just all to do with the venue. I think that the set play might be something that I'm quite strong with, and it might suit my game. You know, I can reel off sets in quite quick succession, and that's probably a good trait to have. And, you know, I think that the World Championships is a tournament that is obviously you'd want to play your best darts at, and I feel like I'm quite close to playing my best darts of the world, and it's a place you want to do that. So, you know, I'd love to pick up a world title one day, and, you know, I take great confidence every time I you know, play in the World Championships now, because I've got a great record there. Let's
talk about a title that you have picked up recently, and that was this past Saturday, the Players' Championship 1, your first senior title, as we mentioned at the start, and you were playing well right from the get-go, and a 6-5 against the master Joe Cullen in the quarter-final, semi-final, just missing that double 12 to wrap it up with a 9-darter going into the final. How were you feeling? Did you feel like this was the time to get that first title?
Yeah, I think, you know, sometimes, you know, Joe Cullen, he missed a match dart against me, and I went out last dart, and, you know, 6-all, and missing a 9-dart, going out and 10 against Darren in the semi. You just sort of think, you know, is it finally going to be my day? You know, everything seems to be going my way. My timing was great. I was, you know, previous games that weren't on the stream, I was, you know, taking doubles out at the right time and hitting 140 to leave a double at the right time. Just my timing was impeccable on Saturday. And I think, you know, another good example was the 161 in the final against Ryan when he was sat on 16. And I think that's something that I'm desperate to implement into my game, is, you know, get that good timing. And before the final had happened, like I just said, I felt like it was my day. I felt like everything was just going my way, and it did in the final as well. And it is quite a relief for me, because I think I probably would have been the highest ranked player in the world at the moment that had not won a ranking title. So, you know, it was well overdue. I felt like it was, you know, my time to win one. And, you know, like I said earlier, I feel that hopefully this is going to open the floodgates now for me to, you know, win some more, because the first one's always the hardest. So, yeah, I believe, you know, I could win a few more this year.
Yeah, you've ticked the first one off, and we saw the great sportsmanship on show between you and Ryan Searle after the game, sharing the microphone for the post-match interview. Most importantly, did you stick to paying for dinner, and what did you go for?
Yeah, me and Ryan are good friends. You know, we've been good friends for a few years now. We practice at majors and now at ProTours and stuff, and we sort of drag each other along. We try and build each other up and help each other, and, you know, we're quite supportive of one another. Obviously, when we play each other, it's full focus on the game, and, you know, we both want to beat each other. But when we're not playing each other, you know, we're very supportive. And, you know, when we were sort of 40th in the world, we both said that, you know, we could be the next two to, you know, push on and get in the top 16. And, you know, Ryan's already done that. I'm sort of getting close. So, yeah, you know, we're quite similar players, good scorers and stuff like that. But, yeah, I did pay for dinner. Yeah, we went for something to eat. And it's nice, you know, it's nice for Ryan to, you know, because sometimes when you lose, you just want to be by yourself. But Ryan was more than happy, you know, to go out something to eat together. And, yeah, it was good fun. We had a good laugh. And, you know, Ryan's won a few titles, and he was just happy for me to win my one. And he just wanted to, you know, go out something to eat and celebrate it. And, you know, he's a great guy, honestly, and fair play to him.
Well, before the weekend, you were on the border of the Pro Tour top 16. You're now firmly in there, which puts you in a strong position to be seeded for the Euro Tours, which you mentioned, even more stage events possible for you this year. How important is that for you as well?
Very important, actually. You know, because it's where the big ranking money's at. You know, if I'm in the Euro Tours as seeded, it's my big opportunity to keep adding and keep staying there. You know, the qualification for Euro Tours are quite hard. you have to win 2 or 3 games just to get to the first round stage of the actual Euro Tour. And that's not easy. You got to beat some good players. So I'm happy to just be straight into that second round now. And obviously being in that second round, you're going to have to face some tough first games. But what stage game feels good. I feel like if I can stay solid this year, I think the match play in the Grand Prix is good. I could be in them again, and that's what I want really.
And 2 more before I let you go. I know you went full time with darts a few years ago, but what does this week look like for you before you head back for the next lot of Pro Tours this weekend? Is there any local darts during the week? And of course, it's your birthday this Friday as well.
Yeah, there's I don't really play much local darts anymore. I seem to stick just to PDC, and I used to obviously play league darts and county and Super League still, but I feel like I put too much pressure on myself, tried too hard, and it used to put me in a negative state of mind. And I just stick with PDC now and practicing at home, and I feel like I just have to exert all my energy into my job really, and that's in the PDC. And that's a nice thing about being seeded for the Euro Tour, is that obviously my birthday Friday, so I don't have to travel down Thursday and play all day Friday. I can stay at home and enjoy my birthday, and obviously till I have to go. So yeah, that's another good plus on being seeded for the Euro Tours.
Happy days. And lastly, away from the darts, we know you're a Leeds United fan. You went to Ellen Road last year to do some filming. How do you see the rest of the season going for Leeds? Are they going to stay in the Premier League?
Yeah, see, last year we was fantastic. This year we've sort of lost our mojo, I think. The defending is not been as good. We're not scoring enough goals, and I think we're a bit inconsistent. I still think we'll stay up. I still think, we'll probably finish maybe 16th, 15th, 14th sort of stage, but I was a bit worried when we didn't add in the transfer window, to be honest. I think that we have a lot of injuries, and I think that's what's sort of causing us to the setbacks in playing games and stuff. We're having, our left backs playing centre mid, and our centre mid's playing left back, and centre backs playing CDMs. It's just everyone's playing in different places, but I hope so. But I believe that we'll just about scrape through and stay up. And in the summer this year, I think we're going to have to add some quality into the team.
Well, maybe Leeds can take a bit of inspiration from your success at the weekend, Luke. Congratulations again on the first title, as I say, surely the first of many, and wish you all the best for this weekend and the rest of the season.
Yes, thanks for having me on. Thank you very much. Cheers.
Thanks again to Luke for joining us. Now on to the Premier League. The new format Premier League is up and running after the opening night in Cardiff last week. What did you make of it? Has it got legs, or is it still too early to tell?
Yeah, and I kind of hinted at my answer to this earlier in the show when I said I paid more attention to the World Seniors first day than I did to the Premier League. And therefore, I don't really know whether this has legs or not. It seemed like it went well. I thought there was always that chance that it might drag out because of having to go through 7 matches as opposed to 5. But it seemed to end at a reasonable hour, unlike the World Seniors. There were a couple of matches that weren't as good. The final was very one-sided, but obviously the way Peter was playing, it would have been anyway. But I'm going to try to pay closer attention this Thursday because there's no World Seniors for it to compete against. But I'm still going to withhold judgment. I'll leave it to you, Alex, to give your thoughts, and maybe I'll circle back next week once I've given it a fair shake.
Yeah, that's fair. I mean, I was going to say a little bit similar as well. I was going to say it's probably a little bit too early to say how I think this format's going to go for the rest of the year and how I see it maybe continuing next year or maybe evolving even more. But there didn't seem to be too much criticism on social media. And like you say, with the World Seniors going on the same night, I know a lot of our listeners like you were tuning into the World Seniors because it was a one-off event, and the Premier League, we are going to see it for 15, 16 Thursday nights. So I think a lot of our listeners were thinking a little bit similar to you. They're going to wait to watch the Premier League when there's nothing else on. So we'll see this week and the following week when there's no competition for the Premier League. There's no World Seniors going on. But yeah, I did catch most of it on Thursday night, and it is interesting to see how the atmosphere changes in the night as well, because we saw with the opening game, Joe Cullen making his debut against Johnny Clayton, the homecoming hero for Johnny Clayton. The atmosphere in Cardiff was electric. But then you see him come back an hour or so later for his semi-final, and then about half an hour, 40 minutes later for the final. So the reaction kind of dimmed down each time. It wasn't as electric as it was in that first one, which is something that we are going to see with this Premier League. You're going to see players come back to their home country, like the Scottish players go back to Scotland. You'll see Joe Cullen in the ones that are local to him get a bigger reaction. But if they get further in the tournament that night, they're not going to get the same reaction. So it kind of loses a little bit of that spark, if you like, going into those final games as far as the atmosphere for the games. And you see it as well with the players. Johnny Clayton kicked off with a 103 average. His average dipped after that for each game, 96 in the semi-final, 88 in the final. And Peter Wright on the other side of things, he was the one that came out on top with that 6-1 win, 113 average in the final. And he said in his post-match interview that for him, this format could really play into his hands, because usually you only get the one game on that stage, and they all are different stages that they play on. You get that first game, if you get through, you get adjusted to the stage, and then if you get the semi-final and the final, you've got 2 more games and you get more used to it as the night goes on. So you could see, like Peter Wright, a 113 average, a real big average for the final, like he did from him. It's still a long way to go, and I think the adjustment period for the players is something that is going to continue for the next few weeks at least, as they get to grips with this new format, how they're going to peak for that first game and come down, get back up for the semi-final, and if they get even further, get up for the final. That's something that we're going to see over these next few weeks as the Premier League continues. But yeah, a little bit like you, I'm going to reserve judgment for now. We have only just had the one night, but based on the reaction that we've seen so far, I don't think there's many people that are moaning too much about it, which has got to be a good thing.
Let's continue on to the worst part of the show for me, and it's our predictions night 2. We still have 43 players and 1 co-host left in the last man standing competition. I won't make anyone here have to guess who that one co-host is. I'll just give a hint that it might not be the person currently speaking, because that person picked Michael Van Guren in the first night. Yeah, let's go on to those predictions, though, and we'll start with the first match. And it's with the person who won the first night, Peter Wright, going against the person who knocked me out the first night, Michael Van Guren. Granted, he didn't knock anyone else out the first night, other than people who picked him in the last man standing competition. How do you see this one?
Yeah, and just to say, you weren't the only one that went with Michael Van Guren. 42 of our listeners going with MVG to get the win over Gary Anderson. So all of those people, along with yourself, going out. 55 people going with Gerwyn Price, who lost to James Wade in the first game. So we lost a lot of the entries in that first night. Started off with 160, including us two. We're now down to 44, so that the field has been cut by quite a bit. As far as the first game, you would back Peter Wright to beat Michael Van Guren, and I'm assuming this is going to be the first game of the night. They're going to go in the bracket order. Michael, can he turn it around this week? He's going up against a Peter Wright that is in red hot form. He is the world champion. He's just picked up a Pro Tour title of the weekend. But I'm going to go with MVG. I'm going to go with the handicapper's nightmare. Whenever I fancy Peter Wright to win, I usually back against him in case to kind of jinx it a little bit. So I'm going to go with MVG. I think it's going to go very tight. I think it's going to go all the way to 6-5. I think a few of these games are going to go 6-5. So I'm going to go 6-5 to the handicapper's nightmare.
The new handicapper's nightmare. Although maybe Daryl Gurney is trying to win back that title off. Yeah, Peter Wright's just playing too well right now. And Michael Van Guren, I mean, I guess we could go back a couple questions to who caught my eye. And Michael Van Guren, but for the same wrong reasons that he did for much of last year. And it's just that inconsistency that had him steal away the handicapper's nightmare title. Peter Wright, just more of the same. And that's just really consistently good darts. Obviously in the Premier League Thursday, but on both nights in Barnsley. And I don't see any reason to think that night 2 in Liverpool will be any different than night 1 in Cardiff or days 1 and 2 in Barnsley. I'll go Peter Wright to win it 6-3.
Second game of the night, and it is a repeat of the weekly Dartscast match of the year for 2021. Johnny Clayton against Michael Smith. How do you see this game going?
Yeah, it's a tricky one. Michael Smith just didn't really show up to the first Premier League night and didn't play at his best on either day in Barnsley. Granted, he's still in the top 20 in averages over the Players' Championship events, but he was second lowest of the players in the field. Only James Wade of the Premier League players was lower in Barnsley over the 2 days. Johnny Clayton still in the top 10 in averages, obviously made it to the final and had 2 good performances before the final. All the form seems to indicate Johnny Clayton, but I think Michael Smith will kick it into gear at some point. And why not on night 2? in Liverpool. So I'll go Michael Smith to get over the line 6-5, and I think stepping up significantly on the form that he showed on the first night.
Yeah, I've got it going exactly the same. And looking back on how the two players performed last week, of course, Johnny Clayton making the final, Michael going out in the first round with a below 90 average, you'd be saying this is a game that's going to go Johnny's way. But I think based on the game that those two had at Ali Pali, you spoke with Michael on the show recently, how much he enjoyed playing against Johnny, that the two have a lot of respect with each other. I think these two are just going to have a great game of darts. I think we are going to see the high 90, low ton averages for this game. And like you, I think it is going to go Michael's way. I think he's going to get his first win of the Premier League season. And like you, I've got to go into 6-5. And unlike you, because you're not in the competition anymore, this is going to be the player that I'm picking for the last man standing this week. Michael Smith is my man that I'm going with.
Oh, that competition's still going on? Third match of the night, it's James Wade against Joe Cullen. James Wade, of course, semi-finalist on the first night. Joe Cullen went out in the very first match. How do you see this one?
I'm going to go with Joe Cullen on this one to get his first win as a Premier League player. And he didn't play too badly against Johnny Clayton last week. Those two, as I said, they opened up the show in Cardiff, and the atmosphere was something to behold. It was unbelievable, and Joe even averaged 95 in that game despite all that was going on. That was quite a baptism of fire for him, but he missed a few doubles on that game. It could have been closer, and I think that the two of them maybe gave themselves a little bit too much respect on the night. But against James Wade, I don't think there's going to be any of that. I think we're going to see Joe with his head screwed on for this one fully, and I think we are going to see him get that first win. James Wade somehow got a win over Gerwyn Price, who didn't play well last week, but I think we're going to see Joe turn up in this one. Another high 90s average. I'm going to go 6-3 to Joe Cullen.
Yeah. Ooh, this is a tough one. I'll go the other way around. I'll go Wade to yet again make a semifinal. Typical Wade, finding ways to win matches. Did so in the quarterfinals last time when he wasn't playing at his best, and he did so for much of the World Championships without playing his best. And that's just what James Wade does, and I think he'll do it again against Joe Cullen. So I'll go the other way around. You said 6-3, right?
Yes.
I'll also go 6-3, but I'll go to the machine.
Final game of the quarterfinals in Liverpool, and it is Gerwyn Price against Gary Anderson. How do you see this last one going?
Yeah, another person I could have thrown out as someone who caught my eye last week, but didn't have on my list, was Gary Anderson, because top 10 in the averages over the 2 days in Barnsley, but also some really good performances, and also had a good showing at night one. And he was the player who, on paper, was the least deserving in the field. And, if you look at the FDI rankings, which I meant to mention last week, he was 18th in the world entering this, behind even, the person right ahead of him was Ross Smith. Ironically, Ross Smith is the only player who has a better record against Gary Anderson than Michael van Gerwen does. But Ross Smith was the person one spot ahead of him entering last week in the FDI form ratings. But Gary Anderson played very well in the Premier League and even better in the Players' Championship events. Gerwyn Price, though, is the world number one, if only for a few more days as Peter Wright closes in on him. And Gary Anderson can play like he did last week, and that still won't be enough against Gezi. And that's how I think it'll go. I think Gezi is just going to play much better than he did in that first weekend. That first night, and I'll go to the world number one to beat the two-time former world champion 6-4.
Yeah, I've got this one going Price's way as well, but I'm going to go a little bit closer. I'm going to go 6-5 on this one. Like you say, we saw Gary Anderson really turn up last week, especially the Premier League, and as I said earlier on in the show with the ProTours, that power scoring for the first nine average. If he can produce that in this game in Liverpool, he's going to give himself chances, and it is all about whether he can take those chances against Gerwyn Price. If Gerwyn Price plays like he did last week, he'll get plenty of chances. If Gerwyn Price plays like we know he can, then he's going to get fewer chances, but you would expect him to get those chances. So I think this one is going to go 11 legs, like I've predicted a few of the other quarterfinals to go. It's going to be an entertaining night to kick off with the quarterfinals, but I'm going to go Gerwyn Price. I've got a few of the players here picking up their first win of the season. Michael Smith, Joe Cullen, and Gerwyn Price is going to add his name to that list as well. I'm going to go 6-5 to the Iceman.
Anything else for this week?
As always, got to say big thank you to our listeners for listening. We appreciate the support. Big thank you to our guests for joining us as well. It was great to catch up with John Gwynne, and it was really good to hear him in the commentary box on Sunday for the World Seniors. Also, thanks to Luke Humphries for stopping by as well. Congratulations to him on that first Pro Tour title. I'm sure it's going to be the first of many. And just lastly as well, if you are like me, still in the last man standing competition, get involved. You'll know if you're in because you'll have predicted one of the winners last week in the quarterfinals. So remember, you can't pick the same person you picked last week. You've got to go with someone else. Tweet us who you think is going to get through to the semi-finals. And if you're right, you're going to be in for the next round. And who knows, you may be the last one standing going into next week and you might already win the trophy. But we'll soon find out. Get your picks in if you're still involved. Enjoy the darts on Thursday night, at the weekend, whenever you're watching the darts. Just make sure that you enjoy it.
It was very obvious that the you were saying there was not your co-host, but the listeners, because I definitely cannot win it. But if you have been knocked out, just remember, the Premier League remarkably is exactly 16 weeks long. So what does that mean? There's another competition starting in week 9. So like me, you might, if you're out already, there's still one last redemption to come about. Just have to hang tight for a little while and enjoy the darts in the interim.